Good evening, friends. This is Steve Ben-Nun, and here on Ben-Nun Institute of Biblical Research. This is the first time I think we've ever actually ran a live broadcast on Ben-Nun Institute. And I just thought I'd share some thoughts with you guys, and that's one of the reasons why I figured I'd just run it live this evening. Just so many things are going on, haven't had a chance to get caught up. So maybe people will join us tonight. Maybe they won't. Don't have any idea. It's really unexpected for our friends here on Ben-Nun Institute for me to do something live. So anyway, God bless you, Brother Christopher. So I can see it for a second or two, but I don't want to get caught up in watching comments. So, but I wanted to just share some thoughts with you guys. We're a lot of things we're going to be getting into. A little bit on this subject here tonight, dreams and visions, that I'll be talking about over on Patreon, but not right now, not tonight. Tomorrow, if everything goes well, those that watch Patreon, Israeli News Live on Patreon, you'll be able to catch Yana with me tomorrow discussing some interesting topics. Probably later, we're going to probably record late morning, something like that, but we'll just have to see how that goes. So anyway, we just want to thank you for supporting the work we do here, and God bless you all. And we share our love back to you as well. And glad to see so many people joining in tonight. Reason I wanted to discuss with you guys about visions and dreams, I normally don't get into that very much with anybody. I have shared different dreams and visions I've had over the years, but not, by no means, not everything. Because I don't like to major on those things. But there's one in particular that I had on the third temple that I did not realize how prophetic it was until after the fact. And I first had the vision back in 2014. But before I go into that one there, I want to just share some things with you that I think is interesting, because I was talking to Sister Rosa earlier this evening, and precious sister, her and the group that she has out there in Texas. And I had not thought of this in years as far as about what had happened, but I began having visions at a young age. To my knowledge, the earliest one I remember is 14 years old. Sometimes they come up again, and I'll remember one that I'd totally forgotten about. But when I was 14 years old, I was already reading the Bible, but of course I grew up in a family that wasn't religious. Even though I had a Jewish mother, Jewish father, they still were not religious. They didn't go to synagogue, didn't go to churches, anything like that. But I did have a Bible. I read the Bible quite frequently, but I wasn't really serving the Lord at the time either. And my sister at the time, she was 16 years of age, and she was dating a boy, and they wanted to go to a Boston concert, the rock and roll band, over in Mobile, Alabama. So I guess that would have been, oh wow, I'm not a young guy anymore, so I know it was in the 70s. I can't remember exactly when, maybe around, I don't know, 77, 76, maybe even as early as 75, I forget now, but they had a concert in Mobile, Alabama. And I was kind of being sent along with my sister and her boyfriend as a chaperone, so to speak, by my mother. And we go there to this event, and while we were there, we were in, their seats were way up in the balcony of the Mobile Auditorium there. And I'm sitting there in this seat, and suddenly it's almost like I was taken from my body and I was pulled way back, like I was all the way in the very furthest point of the building, and I'm looking down and I can see all the people there. And as I'm looking at all these people there, I realize that, or excuse me, as I'm seeing them there, I see them with their lighters. I hear the band playing their rock and roll music and stuff. And then I don't know whose voice it was, Holy Spirit, the Lord, who it was, but he spoke to me and he said, "Look around you. And what do you see?" And I looked around and I saw these people. And in hindsight, it kind of reminds me of the way God dealt with Jeremiah. When he would show him the vision and he saw a certain thing and he says, a basket and had the fruit in there. And the Lord said, "What do you see?" That's exactly what was happening to me then. And the next thing I know, I'm back in my body again and the visions left me. Well, I don't know how long after this happened later, but I would have to say within a 6 month period, maybe less. There was a girl that lived across the street from me. Her name was Leah, and Leah, we were really good friends. We're not boyfriend girlfriend, but very good friends. And Leah asked me one day if I would go to church with her. She belonged. Her mother was a United Pentecostal girl, and so I agreed to go. And of course, we were young at the time, and like the young kids did there, and they were in one of the biggest United Pentecostal churches there were at the time. And we went in. I'd never been in a Pentecostal church in my life. I'd never seen all the shouting and screaming and clapping and speaking in tongues and things like that. But I wasn't really bothered by it or anything. Of course, I was young. It didn't really matter to me. But we went up into the balcony of the church there, and that's where a lot of the young people would sit while the service was going on, mainly because they just wanted to be able to talk to one another. And I'm sitting there with her, and suddenly again, I go into a vision. And I'm again pulled from my body, and not maybe literally, but it's what it felt like. And I'm way back as far as you could be in the church, and I'm looking down, and I'm seeing all the people and how they're doing. And again, the voice spoke and said, "Look around you. What do you see?" And I'm looking around. They had a band playing there, and it really sounded like a rock and roll band, quite frankly. But I mean, I didn't think nothing of it. I'm a young guy, didn't think nothing of it. And then the voice said, the spirit is the same, only the words have changed. Now, you have to keep in mind, in the vision, before he said to me to look, right after he said to me, "Look around and what do you see?" he also took me back and showed me what I had seen in that Boston concert, however many months ago before that was. And then now he's showing me them, and as he says, "Look around you, what do you see?" And he says to me that the spirit is the same, only the words have changed. And I realized that the church had become under a rock and roll spirit. I still didn't understand why. The Lord had showed me that. And I guess it was 4 years later that I seen Jesus, Yeshua, in vision as well. I won't go into that tonight. But what I wanted to share with you guys a little bit, though, that I thought was very interesting was in 2014, I had another vision. And this was where I was there, as I've told you guys before, I was on Mount Zion. And while I was on Mount Zion, I saw a bunch of Orthodox Jews praying. And they were praying, and I don't know how I knew it, but in the vision, it's just like the one that I'd had when I was a teenager. There were things that I knew and I could understand, but even though I couldn't see it. So I'm standing there on Mount Zion, and of course it was totally different than the way it used to be when I lived in Israel back in 2004, 05, 06 time frames. And as I'm looking around, of course I knew back then that it was like sawgrass on the side of the hill there up to the parking lot before you go into the Zion's gate there. Having no idea that had all been cleared off. But in the vision it was all cleared off. It was just rocky dirt and everything there. And I saw the Orthodox Jews praying. And for some reason, I knew that they had built the third temple. And not only did I know that they had built the third temple, but I knew that there was some sort of evangelical group that was behind it and that was also participating in the service on that particular day of the temple. Now, how I knew these things, I didn't know. But the weird thing was any of you that may remember what they called this thing called the Brownsville Revival over in Pensacola, Florida, back oh gosh, I guess that was in the 90s or something like that, early 90s. Um, I knew that the person that was speaking there had been a part of that Brownsville revival, but I didn't know who it was. I just knew they had been a part of it. And the strange thing is, when the Brownsville revival was going on, I actually lived only like a couple of blocks away, because my grandparents owned a lot of the property that was adjacent to where they were at, literally right across what they called Cervantes or Mobile Highway. I think it's Mobile Highway right there. It changes to Cervantes right after you cross W Street there. And so at the time, I was actually living right there by it. I'd actually went there a couple of times just to see what it was like, and I was blown away by it because there were people prostrating themselves in front of banners all around the building there, and I just felt like it's kind of like a form of idolatry. That was just my own personal opinion. Nothing against the people, but I just thought it was just a little, it didn't set with me. I just have to say that way. But anyway, in the vision, I knew that they were partly behind the building of the third temple, and that the man that was speaking there at the third temple at that time, whether it was a dedication service or whatever, I don't know, but that was happening, and he was a part of that Brownsville revival. Who he was, I have no idea. I know that was Steve Hill, I think, was their like main evangelist at the time, but I think he's already died since then. But then you also have Michael Brown that was part of that as well. But I don't know which man it was. Kilpatrick, I think, was the pastor of that church at the time. I've actually met him before. But at any rate, while all this was going on, I switching back in the vision, this is when the Lord, I thought, okay, they're praying, I'll pray as well. So I knelt down and I began to pray. And that's when on the rock, in an amber light, came across, written on a rock, and it was in the Hebrew language, but I understood it in English. It said, "There's a man drinking upon my holy mountain." And then it went away. And then again it came across. And it said, "You're to remove him." And I remember getting up, even though I know what was going on in the background. And while I'm walking through these people, I could tell something was wrong. Something was seriously wrong. And I'm walking in between these Orthodox Jews that are praying there on Mount Zion. And then I found this guy. And a lot of people used to ask me, was it the Pope, Steve? Because, at the time, and I really thought the vision had something to do with Pope Francis, because I knew he had fulfilled biblical prophecy of Obadiah, the man drinking upon my holy mountain, and they would continue to drink and they would swallow down. So I felt like maybe it had to be part of that as well. But at any rate, as I saw this unfolding, when I finally found the man and he turned around, he knew I was coming, and it was Satan. That's who it was. I don't know how I knew it, but that's who he was. He was the devil, or devil incarnate, whatever you want to call it. And he poured out. He had a big chalice, like a glass, like you'd see the Catholic Church use or something, where they have their communion service. And he poured the wine out on the ground, and he said, "I've stopped drinking." And I said, "But you have to go." And he says, "For how long?" And I always thought that was a crazy question. I said, "I don't know." I said, "But God says you have to leave." And then I came out of the vision. I didn't know what to think of it, but this is what really got me, and I wanted to just share this with you guys, is that in 2014, I never thought nothing about the fact of Donald Trump running for president at the time. I did not even know that the Brownsville revival was involved with the New Apostolic Reformation. I did not know that this group of the New Apostolic Reformation would be the ones that would be the strong supporters of President Trump becoming the President of the United States. Also, they are the very strong supporters of Israel building the third temple. And that's when I began to realize this was far more prophetic than I had even remotely considered at that time. So, But I just thought I'd share some of that stuff with you there. I want to get back to teaching over here on Dunoon Institute because we just really need to speak the Word of God, and also let you guys know the more controversial things we are going to put over on our Patreon channel. We are really pushing the envelope of being shut down. Uh, the truth is just something they don't want out there. And sadly enough, other than some things I will speak on when it comes to biblical, I'll still speak biblical things on Israeli News Live that are very controversial. I won't speak it here because I don't want to take a chance of us losing being able to speak to you, speak about the gospel. But I will say this, if there's ever been a time to win Jewish people to Christ, this is the hour. And I know a lot of the things that we're exposing really seems to be in some people's minds, you know, where's your love for the Jewish people? Well, that's the whole issue. That's what I'm questioning about a lot of other Christians out there. To me, they're selling Jesus Christ out and taking in a Talmudic doctrines instead. And it doesn't help the Jewish people at all. If we're ever going to help the Jewish people, we have to take them the gospel of Jesus Christ. We have to use Yeshua, we have to use the apostles, we have to use Paul. These were the examples of how to speak to the Jewish people. But instead, I'm seeing just the opposite creep up in the church. And it's really come to a place to where it's almost as if, and I say this in light of this dream that I had, because it was this group, this evangelical group, that had sold out Christ. Sold out Christ. And instead, and who knows, because if you think about it, it reminds me of Judas right at the communion table, where Jesus was giving the bread and the wine, but he was betrayed by his own. He was betrayed by Judas Iscariot. And unfortunately, I see a lot of Judases in the camp today. Very sad. And I don't really understand what these ministers, what they have in their mind, if they really think this is going to help the Jewish people by embracing Talmudic, Kabbalistic beliefs and things like that, but it doesn't. You know, every Jew I have ever known, myself included, once you recognize who Christ is, that's all in all for you. You're not interested in anything else. So anyway, blessings to you. Thank you for listening and being patient with me here for a few minutes here. Just wanted to share some of my heart with you. And we'll be doing some pre-recordings here next day or so, sharing some messages here with you, getting back to the basics. I'm Steve Benoon with the Dunoon Institute. God bless you.